What is up, my fellow Tobians? I am Logan, the Totally Epic Gamer, and today we're going to be looking at the Tool of Destruction minigun build. There's been some recent changes to the Tool of Destruction minigun build, so I've decided that we're going to do a new version update on it and kind of just walk through the changes. Overall, this build will never be gold meta because of the changes, but at the same time it does provide a very consistent amount of damage, and it can definitely complete CT15 at silver. It's just slow, and that's kind of the downfall of all these changes, and I understand where they were going, but unfortunately because of this, Tool of Destruction no longer has that ramping ability, but we'll get into it. So first I just want to go over the class. You'll see that I have 3 points left over, and I'm going to explain why. You need everything I've chosen so far, and it's very important to the build, and that's kind of where you get stuck, and we'll kind of go into this. So first, obviously, we're taking some anomaly power. Tool of Destruction works off anomaly power, not bonus firepower, as you might think. Reduced ordnance skill cooldown. This is going to be very important because we're going to be spamming shrapnel, and that's going to be a big portion of our damage, and so we want the cooldown to be as low as possible. You could maybe argue that you don't need this one, but it's just, there's no real other choice for it, so you kind of just have to take it. Over here, resistance piercing, always good. You can get almost no resistance piercing without mods. It's not an attribute, so it's kind of hard to grab, so you should always kind of grab it when you see it in the tree. Moving on, you kind of have to grab this portion. We skip this because we don't need our melee skill to inflict toxic. It's not very important to us. You could make a case that you need it for one of the mods, but you'll see that it's generally not needed. We take the resistance by 20% because the first shot dealing 15% of our anomaly power is not helpful in any case. We will not be reloading, and we'll be running the minigun the whole time. Next, we have take this because it's in the tree, but anomaly power is always good. We take wipeout, deal 30% or 20% more damage to enemies below 30% health. This is very good for killing elites, and it's just kind of just a little bit of a buff when you get close to the kill timer. So generally what this actually ends up being is something like a 6% overall damage boost. It's not bad. Here, every time we throw down Blighted Turret, we get 30% increased anomaly power for us and our allies. Generally pretty good. We're going to be needing anomaly boosts like this, so we'll be running Blighted Turret on the build, and we'll get into that. Again, another cooldown reduction because the opposite is toxic lasts longer. We don't need toxic to last that long. Of course, it's more damage, but it doesn't add too much. Anomaly power by 6% is part of the build. Here, increased skill leech by 15% whenever you use anomaly. We're going to get into why you don't need that, but why we're going to be choosing it. Anomaly power by 6% because the opposite is 20% toxic damage. Not really too needed, so we skip it. Resistance piercing, as I said before, hard to come by. It's good always. Anomaly power, always good. Here, every time you activate Scrapnel, you get 50% armor boost. With the new changes, armor mitigation correctly calculates, and you're going to see it right away. Like, you'll notice that you're not dying as fast if you've been putting a lot of points into armor type things, and you'll see that the calculation is working fairly well now, and it's very hard to die. And so with that being said, that's why this is quite good. Moving on, it's part of the tree, but it's good. 10% more damage for you and your allies, or 10% decreased damage, sorry, for you and your allies against elites. More anomaly damage because the opposite is toxic damage. You don't really need it. And activating ordnance skills increases anomaly power. So this is why we really have to run Scrapnel pretty often. Gives us a lot of anomaly, gives us armor. It really just kind of rounds out our build. So now we're left with 3 skill points. You could argue that you could get rid of this here and be left with 4 skill points. The problem is you have nowhere to go. Right, you kind of need everything you've chosen. So if you try going up here and you go, okay, I'm going to get this, going to get skill leech, maybe I'll get some gadgeteer, what are you really going to do? You know, you kind of need to use your Blighted Turret, and you need Scrapnel. So how are you going to inflict freeze? It's just not likely going to happen. You won't be able to get the vulnerability. Blighted Turret does not apply that much toxic to too many people, so how are you going to get up to exposing toxin? Maybe you start going through here, you grab Sniper Master. What are you going to do with that Sniper Master? It's not going to help. Weapon Life Leech isn't going to help. So you get stuck in a way that you have pretty much 3 or 4 points that you kind of want to use somewhere else, but there's nowhere to go with the build. There's nowhere to take extra things that could really help you. So in that scenario, because of that, we end up having to take some choices that you really don't need, but we will take because, well, we have no other choice. So we take skill leech by 6%, then we take double skill leech when your health goes below 30%, and then we end up taking the extra skill leech when you cast ordnance. You are not going to die. You have enough skill leech inherently that this won't be necessary. However, you don't have a lot of other options, so we take all the options we can get. And that's kind of why the build ends up being rounded out like this. I wish there was more options, but unfortunately there is not. So kind of moving into the skills. Scrapnel, as you saw, it's giving us more armor, more anomaly. We're going to need it. It's easily spammable. You see it's on a 10-second cooldown, but I'm going to get to cast it 4 times with this build. So realistically, I pretty much get the uptime completely at all times with the extra armor, extra anomaly, except for when I run out of the shrapnels, and then I'm gonna have to wait, and then I'll be down for about, maybe 7 seconds or something. It's really not that much. So generally you have 100% uptime. Blighted Turret was for another obvious reason, that we get extra anomaly when we throw it, so we always put it down. Also, it gives us Toxic Affliction, which is going to be very important. Tool of Destruction, obvious, it's Tool of Destruction build. We're going to be running the minigun variant, so we need the minigun in the first place. Moving on to the inventory, you'll see that I have a weird weapon here. And the reason is because perpetual ammunition no longer works. It's the one where it reloads if you have under 35% of your magazine, it'll reload the whole magazine if you get a kill. It no longer works. However, we have a greater alternative now, which is, as you might know, Toxic Lead. And because of that, now that Toxic Lead actually works with the minigun, you're just kind of swapping around the mods. Unfortunately, the weapon mods were not going to be helpful. Now you just have a dead weapon slot. That's what kind of sucks here. Bone Shrapnel doesn't work. Killing Frenzy doesn't work, or Killing Spree doesn't work. Embalmer's Rage doesn't work. Putting poison shots on your weapon doesn't work. None of these things work. It's only Fortress that works, so you kind of have to work with what you got. I believe status power and skill life leech from your weapon does count, and that's why you actually have to find a weapon that has status power and skill life leech. You will not find a lot of builds that need that, but it's the only two that are really going to help you, so might as well take it. In the top tree, you have crit damage, weapon life leech, and armor pierce. None of those are going to help you, so on the top part, it really doesn't matter. You just need status power and skill life leech. Moving on, the top three you're always going to want: Anomaly Power, Skill Life Leech, Cooldown Reduction. Those are the top three every single time. Luckily for us, Torrential Downpour set gives all three. And the reason we're running Torrential Downpour set is because Shrapnel creates additional clusters after explosion, dealing damage based on your Anomaly Power scaling. Well, that's really good for us because it's going to mess with the Massacre build that we're doing, and it's going to be really helpful, and Shrapnel will end up doing a lot of damage. Here, I kind of talked about how we're taking Toxic Lead because that's how we're going to refill our minigun, as you'll see. But additionally, we take more traps because that's one additional mine. And then here we have Trap Cluster, which gives us double the amount of mines, which means we go from 2 to 4. Very helpful. And so that's why we kind of take the more traps there. You kind of just need one because then you can multiply it to 4, which is very, very helpful. Here you see we're also taking Fortify. Active minigun grants pretty much 200k armor. This used to not really work too well. The damage mitigation was not noticeable. You would still take a lot of damage and you'd have to really focus on your skill life leech. That is not the case anymore. Armor bonus is really well calculated now, it feels like. And when a Perfor starts hitting me, they all start slamming on. It does like maybe 900 damage. I've got almost 20k HP. Like, they are slamming on me for a long time and it does nothing. It used to be a race, their damage against, the skill life leech. That's no longer the case. Fortify makes you pretty much unkillable. Boost your resistance by 15% every time you use a skill. Not needed. However, no matter what you really kind of put in here, it's not going to increase your damage too much. I've messed around with Euthanizer a little bit, Radical Therapy. Nothing's really helping me out, so it wasn't giving you too many options. And of course, you kind of need the Activate minigun, gives 30% resistance piercing. It's very, very helpful. Like I said, you don't usually get resistance piercing. This helps to just kind of clean through your enemy's ability to defend against you, and that's why we run it. Circle of Power, you could swap it out, but there's not too many other things that are too useful. In this build, it's a lot of utility-based mods. Here, you see I'm getting feedback. That is absolutely not required. You'll never be dropping miniguns, so you don't need it. However, with time restraints, how can you find a perfect build, especially for a build that doesn't generally do too well and takes a long time? So it's kind of just the way it is. Bang for your buck, absolutely necessary. 100% base ammo. It works with Toxic Lead. So we go to 320 base, right? And then 40% of 320 is, I don't know, some quick math amount, 128, somewhere around there. So you get 128 every time you kill somebody afflicted with Toxic. Blighted Turret is the only way to afflict Toxic. So you wait for something to get Blighted Turreted, and then you just kill them, and boom, you're pretty much getting a third of your mag back, or I guess 40% of your mag back, right? So that's really, really important to get bang for your buck. Otherwise, you're only going to get around 64. It'll be a lot harder to get the job done because you're not doing 100k per shot. You're only kind of capped around 65, 78k per shot. Here, Behemoth Boots, it still has emergency stance on it. You do not need emergency stance at all. This has been patched, so emergency stance is no longer always on. However, I haven't been able to find better boots for it just yet. You could change out this mod, but as you're going to see, there's going to be no real point. A lot of your damage is coming from Massacre, which is also on here. Gives 38k anomaly power for 10 seconds, stacks up 6 times. So this is where you used to be able to stack infinitely. It was used to only last for 3 seconds, and before that it lasted for 10 seconds with no cap on both of them. That allowed you to be able to slam your anomaly power up to 3 mil, 4 mil, and start tearing through entire fields of people. It was great. It was a stacking effect. It was hard to keep up. You're really slow because of the minigun, but now it's been capped at 6, and that's the real reason that this build is kind of fallen off. A 6 cap is a little low. Your damage doesn't really get to ramp up to what it needs to be at to be able to run the show. 10 seconds is perfect. You know, you kind of have to keep moving. You're going to drop it every once in a while. You're going to have to restart it. It's hard to restart it. And of course, with any bosses without minions around it, you'll never get the stacks in the first place, so the build kind of dies off there. So for me, this kind of made the build subpar always, and there's no real way to ramp it up that I've been able to find. And in that scenario, that's kind of why this build will never be too strong, but it is very fun and it's easy as hell to achieve, and because of that you can run it at almost any level and at least get silver, and that should really help a lot of players out when they're going through their expeditions. So this build is really just to get up to CT15, and then you can kind of work on your blighted rounds builds if you want to be really meta. So here we're actually going to go through Coliseum, and I'm going to do this live because we're not going to do the whole expedition. You know, part of it is just that it just doesn't do enough damage to really warrant going through an entire expedition. It'd be 20 minutes of walking around. It's just not very helpful, but we can go through the steps of what you need to do with the gun. But right before the gameplay, 92% of you are not subscribed. If you like the content and keep watching, then maybe consider subscribing. There's a lot more content to come out, and if you really enjoy the video, please leave it a like, hit that little bell, and now moving on to the gameplay. So first off, you need the gun that has Fortress on it. You have to have it out, so we have it equipped right now. Without Fortress, you'll be doing so much less damage. It will not be worth it. You absolutely need Fortress to get the ball rolling. And so here we're going to go see why this build is fun and helpful and what really works with it. So start off doing about 20k damage, nothing too crazy, throw an anomaly down. But you see it starts ramping up really quickly. I'm already at around 60k damage, pretty good. Kind of wait for somebody to get the toxic inflicted. So you see I'm kind of, let's say I just run out of bullets here, right? That guy's toxic. You see I go right up to 320. Very easy. But with active minigun, as I said, the armor calculation is pretty good now. We kind of just walk. The blighted turret's healing me for full right now. So no real issues. Oh no, I'm losing some HP. I guess we just shoot right back up to full. So that's kind of the way it is, but if you see how slow your character moves, that's the real issue. You know, that was part of the fun of the ramping up portion, and where you kind of have to trade off. I have to move very slowly to get through everything, but I get to ramp up in the sense that I can get unlimited anomaly power, essentially. And it still does good damage, it's just slower. Now, something that was pointed out to me last time that I wish I knew, and I'm going to tell you guys now, is that when you're holding a scrap grenade, you can actually move a little bit more freely. But actually, it looks like they might have patched that. So, never mind. That was a good portion that would have saved this build, is being able to hold out a scrap grenade to move faster. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. They've also patched that, so realistically, they've taken the fun out of this build and what it can do. As you can see, the damage is still pretty high. You're pretty indestructible, but it's slow as hell walking, and you kind of just have to work with what it is. Because you're stacking anomaly power for Massacre, your scrap grenade will do additional damage. As you saw there, it's about 780k damage. Very, very strong. But the problem is, how are you going to stack them up? How are you going to run them around because you're so slow in the first place? And before, the scrap grenade was doing maybe almost 2 million damage. It could really ramp it up. But with the way that they've kind of worked with Massacre, it's kind of made it more difficult. So that's pretty much the entire video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is kind of the update to the Tool of Destruction build. I hope some of you keep trying it. If you find a way to make it work and you're hitting maybe 150k per shot, let me know. It's definitely become more consistent with 10 seconds instead of 3. And you can see even here, with so much armor, those guys are just slamming on me. Nothing happens. I'm back to full in almost a second. So this build is good, but I don't think it's top tier worthy, and I don't think it's going to be meta. But thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. And if you liked it, please subscribe and maybe leave this video a like.